We are down a mic tonight, so the gentlemen are going to be able to project, but I have a little bit of a harder time, so thank you, Patrick. All right, hi everybody, welcome. Whoever's outside, if you want to try to make your way inside, this is quite a packed house tonight. I'm excited to see you all here. So hopefully you guys will have lots of questions at the end to ask our wonderful speakers. So let me go ahead and introduce them. Oh, actually, before I do that, if you haven't checked in, Catherine Schmidt is right here in the middle, checking people in. So go ahead and find her, make sure you are checked in. If you don't know how many you've attended, email Mr. McFadden, he will be able to let you know, okay? And there's tons of snacks. Hopefully you guys are all well fed. All right, let's get started. So, first of all, we have Lieutenant Colonel Patrick Weinert, who is, do I say retired then? Retired. He graduated in 1998. He is founder and owner of the Money Mission LLC, a financial coaching firm based in Washington, D.C. He earned a BA in political science and economics from here and an MS in management from the University of Maryland. He served 20 years in the United States Marine Corps as an aviator and advisor to the Chief Financial Officer.
I may as well.
And then we have Lieutenant Colonel Matthew Reagan, who graduated in 2000. He was commissioned into the Army as an engineer officer in 2002. He serves in the reserves as an operations officer for the North Atlantic Division of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. He has been deployed twice to Iraq in 2003 and 2011 and served as the Deputy Commander of the Middle East District, U.S. Army Corps of Engineers in 2017. As a civilian, Matt is a program manager for the MED, the Middle East District, and manages a team whose portfolio is valued at $1.9 billion in construction. He earned his PMP, which is his Project Management Professional, Project Management Professional certification in 2011. Matt is married to Ann Brewster Reagan, who graduated in 2000 as well, and they have 2 children. So, welcome our guests.
Okay, so I just want to say it's really great to be here. Thank you for having me. And, I wanted to start out just by saying that I'm not a big drinker, so I have my water here. But I am very interested in connecting with each one of you individually if you're interested in some way, either in the military or in starting a business. Because I can talk to you about either of those. But tonight I want to talk to you primarily about my military experience, because that's really, what this was advertised as. So I've been out of the military now for over 4 years. So the time that I was in, I got in when I graduated from Christendom here back in 97. So 1997 is when I first went into the Marine Corps. And I retired in 2017. And during that time, I got a few questions here that Christy gave me, and I actually hadn't really prepared to answer these concerning the military, but I'm going to kind of ad-lib this a little bit right now. Why did I come to Christendom? So that's the first thing that I wanted to touch on for you guys a little bit. Why did I come to Christendom? So when I first started looking for a college, I really wanted to find one that was going to provide me with a good education, obviously, but I also wanted one that was going to provide me with truth. And when I was a lot younger, I had some other options, okay? And so what I ended up doing was I looked at a couple other schools, and I even had some opportunities to go to these other schools, and they offered even to pay for everything. But I elected to still come to Christendom, even though I wasn't getting a full ride to Christendom. And the reason why was because I said, you know what? I still want to give Christendom a shot. I want to find out whether or not this is, what I've heard it is. And after just a month here, I realized this is the place I wanted to be. And so I'll tell you too, my decision-making process is a little bit involved, right? So, I can make a decision, but if you give me 10 years to make it, I'll probably take 10 years. So when I was told, hey, you may come to Christendom, you might want to go to Seton Hall, you might want to go to St. Bonaventure, I said, okay, well, how much time do I have to decide? And You know, it's a little embarrassing for me to admit, but I'll admit it to you guys that I didn't decide to come to Christendom until commencement day. Like, I took all the way until commencement day to figure it out. My dad was even like, do you think you should go to college? You know, he was kind of like a little bit surprised. But it took me a long time to make that decision, and I even did it saying to myself, you know what? I'm just going to do this just to check it out, and I'm so glad I did. And that's something that I want to leave each of you with, too, is that as we get up here and talk to you about different possible career opportunities, don't view stuff as, I have to make this decision about my whole life right now, right? You know, making decisions about life is something that happens in stages. And don't put too much pressure on yourself to feel like when you leave, you have to have it all figured out. You have to have this grand plan for what you're going to do, because a lot of it is changing, right? Our world is changing, our lives are changing, and we have to adjust to that as we move through life. And so what I say is find something that you really like, and you want to pursue that first, right? Even if it isn't something that is as grandiose as maybe you'd like to dream. If you want to find something a little bit more realistic early, that's a good idea. Now, one of the things that I'm going to say Christendom did for me when it came to my time in the military. What did it provide for me? As was mentioned earlier, I spent 20 years in the Marine Corps. During my time in, I was primarily working as a pilot. So I served as a helicopter pilot, and then later on I served in a position where I was asked to manage the Marine Corps' budget, right? So they're kind of unrelated jobs. But the time that I was in, I would say some of the stuff that Christendom really did most for me was that it gave me the formation to really know what was important, to be able to identify what was important, and to be able to move through my career in a way that I'm still doing my best. I'm still doing what I believe, and I'm following my dreams, but at the same time, I'm adhering to my principles too, right? Because your principles are really, really important. Adhering to those principles of your faith. And that, I think, is, you know, if there's anything that I can say Christendom prepared me for in the military the most, it's the fact that Christendom is an apostolate, right? It's a formation. You're getting a great education here, but you're also getting a great formation in your spiritual life. And that's something that you're going to fall back on quite a bit when you're in the military, because there's a lot of challenges being in the military that you don't necessarily, you can't predict, you don't know. And it will even continue with you even when you leave. So I just want to say that's the number one thing I want to say. The second thing I'm going to say that it really helped with is Christendom helped discipline me to do that transition, because at least the Marine Corps, it's a very conservative, very disciplined organization. And doing that transition from here to the Marine Corps was probably a little bit more natural than it is for people from other walks of life and from other backgrounds, because you already have, right, you're already taught about the value of personal virtue. You're already taught about the value of developing your mind and your prayer life. And that's something that really serves you very well. The other thing, too, that I'm going to say is that it really gives you, you know, the military asks you to do a lot of problem solving, right? And that is, I think, not just great for the military, but also, like I mentioned, if people are interested in starting a business, that's great for being a business owner, too. But in the military, you're called upon quite a bit to solve problems that just pop up. And they may not even be things that you're trained in. They may be totally unrelated to your job. But you're called upon to do that. You may be called upon to do that in stressful and maybe even life-threatening situations. And so having that ability to think is so important. And that is something that Christendom really provides very well. It provided very well for me. In that it's helping you to develop your mind so that you can take information, data, and turn it into actionable, useful information. And that's something that I really can't stress enough. Let's see here. Tips for achieving success. This was another question that I had written down. And that was tips for achieving success. So for those that are interested in the military, okay, so I know everybody here knows Mother Teresa. I don't need to ask that question. Mother Teresa had a great quotation I remember was, if you want world peace, go home and love your family. And I thought that was good because it's, you don't, again, going back to the whole, you don't have to have a grand master plan for your life right away. Don't put too much stress on yourself right away. If you take a step that you can take right now, right, if you can get some action going and some momentum in the direction that you want to move, that's the most important thing that you can do when it comes to starting. I would also say that another thing that I think Christendom helps with is that willingness to keep going even when there's a lot of adversity. Okay? So here, obviously, we're taught a lot about, like I said, developing yourself, developing your character. The military is going to kind of make some demands from you when it comes to that. It's going to ask of you to make some sacrifices, in some cases make some major sacrifices. And your ability to kind of dig deep is going to be called upon on a lot of occasions, especially if you're in for a long time. Right? I went in only wanting to be in for 3 or 4 years. I was thinking, I'm going to go in, I'm going to check it out. Kind of like I did with Christendom. I was like, I'm just going to check it out. And then 20 years later, I'm still in the military, And I'm really glad it worked out that way. Now, I'm not in now, but I stayed in for much longer than I thought I would. And I just want to say that that's something, too, you need to keep in mind. Go into it. If you're interested, go into it. Say, if you're just interested in being in for a few years, that's good, but be open to being in a little bit longer, too, if it's something that, appeals to you as you continue. How am I working, or how did I work to restore all things in Christ when I was in the military? Okay, so the military, again, is a very structured organization. It definitely gives you a lot of life skills, too. So that's another thing that I can speak positively about. You're going to learn not just a lot about, the how-to of managing and leading people, but you're going to learn a lot about yourself. You're going to learn a lot about your own strengths and weaknesses. You're going to learn a lot about being able to understand an organization's strengths and weaknesses and how to guide it. Because everyone who goes in the military, even if you go in and you're, enlisted, you're the very lowest rank, even if you want to do that, or if you want to go in as an officer, you want to start in that rank structure. Wherever you are, you're always going to be called at some point to fulfill or fill a leadership role. And that is going to be something that's a lifelong skill. And you're going to take that with you, even if you're in for 3 years, if you're in for 20 years. It doesn't matter. You're going to take that with you wherever you go, and it's going to be very, very valuable. Let's see here. Another thing, too, is, one other thing I'll say, too, is that having time in the military is also going to do well because it's going to open a lot of doors for you. So even if you're just in for a short period of time, if you get curious about something different afterwards, people are a lot more open to having veterans join their organization because it already kind of gives you a little bit of a stamp of approval from an organization already, right? So if you already have some work experience, if you've already served, and maybe you've been in for a couple of years or for 3 years, and you're saying, hey, I want to get out, I want to do another job, that is going to help you get that other job because a lot of employers, myself included right now, when I look at potential employees, if I see that someone was a veteran, I'll say, well, I know that they have some level of self-discipline. That immediately I know without even having to look at a resume or talk to them. And so that is going to help you too. I guess that maybe probably one of the things too I'd say is having time, to talk with someone too. When you're looking at getting hired, really talk to them and connect with them and find out what it is, that they want. I think that's an important role too. So let me just say before I have Matt come up here, what questions do you guys have for me? Specifically about the military, the Marine Corps. I can answer questions about the Marine Corps specifically. The other branches I'm either going to have to defer to Matt or I'm going to, you can make it up. Questions? Yes.
Sure. I was in the Navy for about 10 years prior to coming here. I transitioned out in early 2017. And one of the things that was greatly concerning me at the time was the direction it was taking regarding, I don't say the Rainbow Coalition, the LGBTQ issues. I was in E5 at the time I got out, and I was really concerned that if I stayed in at some point, the traditional Catholic views on sexuality would be a problem. We were already being asked to ascend to the trans agenda, if you will. Is that much of it? I mean, I was in the Navy. Is that much of an issue in the Marine Corps, or did you ever encounter problems with that? I know there was an Air Force colonel who faced some problems for attempting to invoke religious liberty to not sign a certificate for someone's same-sex spouse, for example.
Right.
Could you speak to that a little bit, please?
Yeah. So keep something. What's your name again?
I'm Gregory.
Gregory, nice to meet you. So keep something in mind here. I retired in 2017. Okay, so I did see some of that, right? So when I was working at the Pentagon, I remember they'd have the LGBTQIA Day or something. They'd have these posters up, and then as soon as President Trump got elected, all this stuff disappears, which was kind of nice. But yes, they do. There is some of that. I'm sure now, that we have, a little bit more, not a little bit more, a lot more liberal, regime and power. I'm sure all that stuff probably is back in spades. How did I deal with it? I would say that you have to you have to kind of approach it with the perspective of do what you can, right, in your sphere of influence. It's kind of like there's kind of like a silence amongst the majority who really don't want that. And it's really what the organization, 90% of the Marine Corps is conservative, right? And I remember hearing once when I was in that 50% of the Marine Corps is Catholic. And for a while I was like, there's no way that's true. And then one day I showed up at my squadron and like everybody in my shop was Catholic. And I was like, oh, maybe this is true. But, it is interesting because there is, a silent majority, I think, in the military that doesn't necessarily want that to be a policy. But they're not necessarily going to say anything about it because they want to make sure that they're obeying orders. But it is, I would say, do your best. You want to do your best to have the influence where you can. Obviously, we want to love all people. And I'm not trying to speak ill of someone. I'm just saying that we don't want to endorse sinful behavior. And we definitely don't want to endorse it publicly. And so you want to make sure that you're advocating what you believe in your conscience. You're doing everything, like St. Thomas More, right? You're doing everything with your conscience, and you're obeying the law because the law will protect you too. But at the same time, you're not going to do something that contravenes your own beliefs. And if that does happen, we're probably going to have a much bigger problem. But I don't know that it's necessarily at that point yet. But that's just because I got out 4 years ago when things were different. So it's a good question. I hope I answered it, but that's the best I can do, I think, right now. Yes?
You said you were in for almost 20 years,
Yeah.
and so I was just curious of how, the sacrifices that your family made, how, that affected your dynamic while being in the military.
Let me think. So when I was in for 20 years. All Marines generally deploy a little bit more than the other services because it's a smaller organization. We're kind of considered a deploying force. I, on top of that, kind of volunteered to be in the deploying forces more and longer, and so I did 6 deployments over the course of my career. And each deployment would be anywhere from 6 months to a year. And then you did pre-deployment training, which sometimes would be, for a 6-month period while you were home. You were gone for 3 weeks or a month, and then you're back for a couple weeks, and then you're gone for another month, and then you're back. So I'm not married. I was not married during that time. But I know that a lot of the married Marines with their spouses sometimes were like, I'd rather you just go on deployment, so I don't have to keep seeing you and not seeing you. And so there was definitely, there's a sacrifice families make there. I think it was a little bit easier for me because I was single, that I didn't have a family that was, I mean, I did have family, right? And they did miss me when I was deployed, but they weren't my wife and kids. It was my sisters and brother and nieces and nephews. And so it isn't exactly the same. But there are sacrifices that are made, meaning to say, especially in the Marine Corps, you're gone from home a lot. Sometimes you're in very dangerous situations. And you also have to realize that you're going to develop relationships with people that may last for a very, very long time. And that's not something that they train you to do, right? Like, so you'll go into the military and you'll go to boot camp and you'll run up and down hills with a backpack on, and you'll have drill sergeants shouting at you or drill instructors. I don't know if that's the way it is in the Army, but that's the way it was in the Marine Corps. I'm just kidding. We're not here for it. But I just remember how you're going to get a lot of relationships that you develop that you're not really stuff you're not trained to do. And an example I'll give you is in 2012. We had a tragic mishap in our squadron, and we had 2 helicopters collide, and all 7 Marines were killed, right? And some of them were very good friends of mine. And even to this day, it's hard remembering that. But at the time, I didn't realize that the relationships I was going to form with some of these families was going to be, for a very, very long time. And I even remember getting like a text message just a month ago from someone who said, "Hey, Pat, can you show up at this memorial today? And can you lead us in a prayer?" And it was just kind of like, yes, I will be there. Because I know it means a lot to those families. And you're going to find that happens. Like, there are going to be relationships, there are going to be things that you do that you have an impact that you just didn't realize you had. And there's a lot of sacrifices that you'll end up making even after you get out. And I would just say you can't always quantify exactly what they're going to be. I think I've taken too much time. Matt, you up?
Keep going, please.
Other questions? Yes.
I was wondering, you said you retired back in 2017.
Right.
Is there a way you can speak more of what you did after?
Yeah. I got out and I started a business. I started a business helping individuals with their personal finances, really just financial coaching. And I do help. I think my primary customer really is active duty military or a veteran, because I understand their situation kind of the best. But I do have people that have hired me that are not military, at all, no relation to the military. But I really started that, and that has been actually that was kind of what I was more prepared to talk about. But that's something that I've worked on, over these last few years to build, and really to focus on, not just trying to help. So here's something I'll just tell you guys. My motivation for that really is, to a great degree, it's you. I know that may sound kind of, funny, but raising money to support Christendom, to support causes like pro-life, to educate people in personal finances, to get them the good discipline so they're saving money and providing themselves some financial security. And the reason why is because, we're doing this, we're trying to really strengthen our culture. It's very easy to, watch the news, not that I do that. It's very easy to watch the news and kind of get depressed, oh gosh, the world's going to, it's going down too. And it's very easy to do that, but what's the most important thing is there's no point in worrying over something that you don't have any control over, right? What do I have control over in my life? Okay, so I have a business and I have resources. What can I do to influence that positively, right? What can I do to make a difference? And that, I think, really has been the driving force behind what I do right now, to answer your question. Because if I can get enough people on financial lifeboats and, I can really help educate as many of us as I can on the fundamentals of our faith and the truths of Western civilization and everything that we cherish, everything that made our civilization great. I mean, that's really what we can do. And that, I think, that's the other thing too I'll mention is, kind of going off on a little bit of a business spiel here. If you're interested in a business, remember something, you got to find something that you're really motivated about. And it's got to be something that's more than just money. Now, I know everybody in here is probably not even thinking about that. But, a lot of people think, well, I want to get into a business because I want to make a lot of money. And that is important, but it's not going to be what drives you. You have to find something that drives you because just like the military, you're going to make a lot of sacrifices. And it has got to keep you going through times where you're like, why am I doing this, right? But you keep going and you have those problem-solving skills that the military can help you develop. You're willing to work hard, you're willing to pivot, you're willing to adjust, you will be successful. So does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay. Yes?
I was wondering if you faced any big challenges in the Marines, like as a Catholic, like living out your faith.
Yes, definitely. I'm not a big drinker, as you can see, and I did mention that earlier, but the Marine Corps has a little bit of a drinking culture in it. Okay, well, we'll be honest. Probably most of the military does. No, not the Army, right? No. Okay, so there's, there is kind of that, that drinking culture. Again, I'm not trying to say alcohol's bad. Obviously, it's not. But there is kind of that alcohol abuse, I think, especially where I was, that was an influence, right? I'm not going to say it wasn't an influence. There's that part of it. There's also the part too of, remember, you are still, it isn't a religious organization. It's probably about as close as you can get to the one today, right? It isn't, so there's still a lot of, there's a lot of temptation, but that is the world. And you just have to go into that knowing that, and you want to make sure that you're doing your best to surround yourself with the people that you want to be like, right? Because you become like the people you hang out with. Again, prayer, the sacraments, the faith is all really, really important, but you cannot leave out, the natural side of things too. So you want to make sure that you are surrounding yourself with people that are encouraging you, that are positive, that are uplifting, right? That aren't trying to pull you, hey, come drinking with me, or hey, we're just going to go, do this, that, or the other thing, which really isn't in accordance with your faith. You don't want to be spending time with them as much, right? Because it has an effect on you. It has an effect on all of us. And so that's what I would say is the big challenge, right? Is leading at the same time, you are in the world, so you have to be exposed to something, right? Other questions? Was that specific enough? Was I too generalized in my answer? Does people want to hear more on that or not? More? Yes?
Can you tell us more about, to the extent you can, of what you actually did while deployed and what your mission set was?
Okay, so that's a good question. It's kind of a complicated question, but I would say for flying was my primary job. I would get up in the morning and brief. I'd get up, right? By the way, that's another thing Christendom definitely helped with was, the public speaking.
Absolutely.
Right? I mean,
well, not for me particularly, but for others. They're going to suffer through me now.
But I would say, the team debate, I got a lot of value from that. When I would get up with Chris Muro, he and I would get up and we'd do our team debate together. And that was definitely very beneficial because a typical day would have been, I get up, maybe I'm on a ship, I wake up, I might grab breakfast, I got to go into what they call the ready room, which is this big room in the ship where the pilots would sit, and I might lead the flight that day. And so I get up and I do a brief, and the brief might be 45 minutes long. And it's going to go through a lot of detail. And then we all go up, get up on the flight deck, we get in our aircraft, we check our aircraft out, we get in our aircraft, we start it up, we fly off the ship, we go do whatever it is that we're supposed to do, we come back, what were the missions like? I mean, there were so many different kinds. You could be flying off of a ship in the middle of the Indian Ocean. I could have been, somewhere like flying around Iraq or Afghanistan. I could be, out somewhere out in the middle of nowhere, flying and supporting Marines on the ground. Maybe some that are fighting, and I mean literally in the middle of nowhere. And so, that was one example. Another job I had was I was what was called a forward air controller. and that is a pilot that is embedded with an infantry unit, right? So the Marines obviously are primarily infantry. That's the culture that we are. And they would take a pilot, they would attach him to an infantry unit, and I lived with them. I was an infantryman just like them. But I was responsible for all the air coordination. So I would talk to the aircraft, I would control them, if they're dropping bombs, or if they're picking up, dropping off supplies, or picking up Marines, or whatever they were doing, I was the guy. I was the one who was familiar with that. So I would live out in the field with them for months. Or when I went to the Pentagon, I was shepherding a process which was managing the Marine Corps' budget. So it's kind of a very broad description, but I guess that's kind of, does that answer your question? No? Yes? You want more detail? What do you like? What more? What can I do to help?
It was good.
Okay. What else? Matthew, you want to? Any other questions for me? Yes, Greg.
I guess if people were interested in joining the Marines, what sort of physical challenges do they expect? How in shape should they try to get before talking to a recruiter?
I would say do your best to get in as good a shape as you can. And by that, the standard PFT for a Marine was you had to do pull-ups, you did sit-ups or crunches, and then you did a 3-mile run. I think you only do 2 miles in the Army.
Not anymore. We'll talk about that later. We've out-hooling the Marines this year.
So that was a standard kind of workout that you did, right? It was like they called it the physical fitness test, but it was. I would say if you did that, if you practice doing pull-ups, if you practice doing crunches, to be honest with you, really to prepare for crunches, you might even just do leg lifts, or leg raises, and then it's easier on your back, and then just go out and run, just run a lot. I know probably a lot of people don't like running, but they do make you run a lot in the Marine Corps. Other questions? Yes?
What kind of vaccines are required for the Marines?
So when I was in, you would generally get kind of a standard, felt like a pincushion sometimes. You get, all the standard vaccines that they give you for, diseases that you have even in other countries that you may not necessarily have here. The other thing too, sometimes they would make you take medications like anti-malarial or other diseases that they would have in other countries that are more common there. They would make you take that stuff. But it was, there were you take a lot of. I'll say this, whenever I had the option to opt out, I usually did. But you didn't always have that option. So you get a lot of vaccines. Other questions? Good? We're good? Okay.
Sorry for the quick break. Go ahead and use the restroom if you need to. It's only downhill from here, folks. Yeah, I have Walter talk. So, before you get started, quick note. I met my wife at Walter's house. I'll just put it up. And despite getting married at 22, she's still married to me. So, there's something to her. Thank you. So, with Pat, thank you. Seriously. I'm going to hope to complement what Pat said, bolster it up, but also contrast it a little bit. The Army experience is a little bit different than the Marines, okay? So, and although we have jokes about the Marines, the Army, Navy, and Air Force, we're all one large department that are a common cause, and all our guns are in the right direction together. So, is there a rivalry? Yes. Do we love each other? Yes. It was funny, when Pat was talking, I was thinking I was in Iraq in '03, and I am a combat engineer, and I'm on the ground, and some of the best sounds you'll ever hear in your life is when the stuff hits the fan, and then you all of a sudden hear these Black Hawk helicopters. So these guys that are calling in these helicopters are literally providing you some immediate relief that you know that the Iraqis can't get against. So I'm so thankful for all the services, but from here on out, I'm going to make fun of Marines, the Air Force, and the Navy as best I can. Okay. So before we get started, I have two disclaimers. One, I'm still an Army officer, commissioned officer, and I'm also part of the Army Corps of Engineers as a civilian. So I just want you all to know that anything I say tonight is my opinion. It's not the Army's. It's not the Department of Defense. It's no one else's. So when you think it's dumb, that's Matt talking. That's not the Army or official policy, okay? The second thing I want to say is I hope you guys are open. You're all here, you're listening, and I know you have to listen to 2 of 9 of these, and you're probably hoping to get some nice salty stories from Pat and I about the Army and the Marines. But I do want you to be open. And the reason I say that is because the best professional decision I ever made in my life was to join the Army, okay? And I know not everyone's cut out for the Army, not everyone's cut out for the Marines, but I know some of you, coming from Christendom, have the character to make excellent commissioned officers, okay? So think about it. And I'm not just talking to all the guys here, I'm talking to the women here. Specifically being, my commanding officer now is Brigadier General Colleton. She is one of the finest officers you're ever going to find in the Army. 2-star general, okay? So this isn't just about guys being masculine and being, what we say, hooah or hoorah, which you pronounce it wrong in the Marines. But it's really about being open to things and experiences you haven't been. And so Pat talks about character, and I'm going to talk a little bit about character too, but really I'm going to try to relay that through my story to where I've been and kind of where I'm at now and where the Army's brought me, okay? Okay, so like Pat said, how do I get to Christendom? I don't have a lengthy story. I'll be quite frank with you. I grew up in Northern Virginia. I went to Seton High School, Manassas. Mrs. Carroll was married to Mr. Carroll at Foreman's College. I went to school with Phil O'Haron. I'm not sure if Mr. O'Haron still teaches here, but
No.
he's retired?
Yeah.
Okay. So anyway, his son was my roommate, and Ted Item. I'm sure there's an item somewhere and or around here today. Probably Bukowski somewhere that I went to high school with. But anyway, it was just very natural for me to go from that high school to Christendom. So it wasn't a dedicated decision. Really, honestly, I'll be honest with you guys, no attribution here. I was lazy, right? So I went to that school, so I'm like, this is a natural fit for me at Christendom. There wasn't any discernment there at all. Okay? You're going to find this theme running throughout my talk tonight about thinking. So I got here, I did room with Phil O'Haron and Ted Item, these excellent guys. So Ted was here, not Ted, actually Phil was here 4 years earlier, so I'm a little jealous that my roommate got invited here 4 years before me. He is a neuroscientist, so maybe I get it, right, that he came here, because we have the biggest mathematics and science departments here. Okay, so when I was here, what did I do? I had fun. I hope you guys do the same thing, okay? Some of the best relationships I ever had in my life came from Christendom, and I'll tell you what, similar to Christendom is the same thing in the Army. If Phil, Pete, Ted, Joe, any of these guys called me from Christendom right now and said, hey Matt, I need you to be in Arizona, I need you to be in California, I'd be there in 5 minutes. And that's not a joke, that's just the truth. But the same thing with the guys I deployed with to Iraq. The unit I deployed with, they called me right now and said, hey Matt, I got a problem. Like, come, I'd be there. So there's a strong similarity to the brotherhood and sisterhood that you have here at Christendom. It very easily translates into the Army. And I can't emphasize that enough. Same with the character development. I'll get into character in a minute. So we got any poli-sci majors?
Yeah.
Very exciting. Very exciting. We got one. Okay, no. For me, one of the things I got at Christendom specifically was political science. Bernie Way, I think, is retired also. But international relations was absolutely amazing. I think you guys still have a politics practical program. Maybe?
Yeah.
Yes? No?
Yeah.
I got to meet Justice Scalia at the time. You might have heard of him. I don't know. That was very exciting. Congressmen, senators. It was a great program that exposed you to the government in a way that you need to know. I'm trying to think what else. Mr. Madden's classes, I think he is still teaching here. That should honestly be a prerequisite for everyone to get into Con Law 1, 2, and jurisprudence. You need to understand how your government works to be able to effectively manage that and to understand where you are in the Department of Defense. So, sorry. My civilian job, I deal a lot with contracts. So we have $1.9 billion in construction in the Middle East right now that's going on, and we execute most of that through contractors. We don't do the construction ourselves. We hire other people to do it. It's cheaper, faster, and better. But to do that, you have to understand law, both from the constitutional law perspective about what we're allowed to do with other governments, but also from the perspective of what's ethical, legal, and moral. And Mr. Madden was in fact, if he's here, I'd love to have a chat with him. But great classes. I highly recommend any major go to him to take his classes. It's great. And then I wrote my thesis under Dr. Lucky, which was interesting. No, it was good. All jokes aside. Okay. So, what's the biggest thing that Christendom has to offer for you guys potentially come in the military? Really, it's character development. It's not a tangible. It's not I can point to one class. It's about who you are when you come out of the school. Okay. I was able to succeed to some degree based upon the values that I had. I'll fast forward a little bit here into my story, but I was 25 years old. I was in Iraq. I was leading a platoon of 26 combat engineers. We're treated like infantry at the time. We're basically treated like infantry, but we're given C4. So we can blow a lot of stuff up, but we're also expected to shoot people. It's great. I'm just kidding. I don't advocate violence. But, so I'm 25 years old. I got 30 high-speed combat engineers under me. And at the time, I don't want to get into it too far because it gets pretty emotional, but we lost one of our own. He was a sergeant. His name was Ben. I don't get into his last name, but he got hit by an IED at the time. And so we went to his memorial service, and he was one of our own. He wasn't at the time, but he was part of our platoon earlier in the deployment. And we had to go out and do some raids. And the hardest thing that you can imagine a 25-year-old doing is trying to convince another group of people who are mostly 18-year-olds to go out into a foreign country with people you don't know, trying to find bad guys that don't wear uniforms, that are getting shot at, to not take revenge out on that loss. That's just a fact. And so we had to give a pep talk. And I just remember coming back on the values that I had here about human life, actually in particular. Talking about the fact that, you know what, not only about the dignity of life, because that doesn't always resonate when your guys die, but really about also the fact that for every person that we take out here, or potentially take out, we're creating a whole other family of people that are going to be disgruntled with the United States government, right? Meaning we're going to extend this war when we don't need to. So we need to be extremely careful about what we do and who we take action on. And I take a lot of satisfaction in my platoon. We came back and they said we had -1 kills in my platoon. And what that means was not only did we have any confirmed kills, because we didn't get into super heavy combat in 03, they were still scared of us, but we actually saved a life. We had a guy that was stabbed right in front of us, dumped out of a car, and we got him to the hospital and saved his life. And you know, most people think about war and they think about, you know, the violence, the kills, you think of Saving Private Ryan. But the other thing you think about is humanity and compassion. And that's one of the things that I learned here. And when I can go back and say, hey, you know what? We actually saved a life when we were in combat. That's an amazing thing, okay? So that's the kind of character development I want you guys to think about, because that's the kind of people that the U.S. Army, the U.S. Marines, the U.S. Navy, and the U.S. Air Force need. They need people who can think about the big problems and see the forest for the trees. They can see the dignity of the human person, okay? All right, anyway, sorry, went off. Okay, so let's bring it back to Christendom. So we've got character development. So a few things I can tell you not to do when you're here. So the Dean of Students at the time was Mr. Brown. You didn't want to see Mr. Brown. Me and Pete Brown, no relation, saw Mr. Brown on a somewhat regular basis. So one of the things I would highly recommend, this is serious, that you do, is not do something that'll have you not only see the Dean of Students, but be on a newspaper, okay? If you don't want your mom and dad to know about it, don't do it, okay? So a lot of people would, well, some people might want to join the military, There's an easy way to not be able to. It's called get a felony, okay? Like get a DUI. Do something really dumb. Don't do that, okay? Not that anyone here would ever do that. But I'm saying going cow tipping in Front Royal might have happened here and there. Another thing I would highly recommend not doing, all right? Oh, that's not true. That I might recommend not doing is, I didn't have a lot of focus. I didn't take the sermon decisions like Pat did super seriously. I kind of went with the flow. So I didn't do any college internships in the summer. I worked at Flanagan's Irish Pub, which was my uncle's pub up in Bethesda, Maryland. I'm not going to tell you stories from there because it's not appropriate. That's the truth. But what I think people should do is really try to experience different things like I did. Honestly, I got lucky. So whether that's the military, whether that's interning at a large business, we're going to finance, we're going to go to law office, maybe helping out paralegal work, do something that excites you like Pat was saying. Get involved. And the other big thing is talk to people. Talk to people that are doing it and say, hey, I'm interested. You would not believe the amount of support you will get from just saying, I want to do this, can you help me? And they might not get you to be a lawyer, as soon as you're in your summer internship. They won't. But they could say, hey, I know somebody. I know someone to get you in the office, or I know someone that could do something to help you get you there. So just ask for help and look for opportunities is a big thing that I would recommend you guys do. And if you have one summer to bartend at an Irish pub, I'm just not saying it's not the end of the world. You might want to do that too. It was a pretty fun time. Poli-sci, hanging out with Walter, having a lot of fun, graduating in political science and economics. I spent a fair bit of time, how do I put this, pursuing people, and so I met my wife. So at the ripe old age of 22, 3 months out of college, I married her. Okay? So in some ways, we're probably still lucky to be married. The odds were not ever in our favor. In any event, we have 2 wonderful kids. We're doing well. But I got married, and the reason I tell you this is because I had not discerned what I wanted to do. I had not given as much thought, and I got a job. And this is 2000, so I don't even remember. Pagers were big. We did not have smartphones, right? So I'm trying to tee this up a little bit. Right. We were getting into the boom then the boom of computers and IT. We had a big tech bubble at the time. It was 2000, and I got into inside software sales, which is a big way of saying we had a software package, and we were trying to sell this to companies. And I worked with another college grad, Steve Story, great guy. And we started this company. It was XML Solutions, and I was making 30 grand a year, and it was great. And I was married, and after 2 weeks, I began to hate my life. Quite frankly, I really did. I dreaded getting up. I didn't like anything. It was very tough because you had to call these people. And in sales, you get 99 no's before you get 1 yes. The 1 yes feels awesome, by the way. It's like a high of like winning a sports tournament when you get the 1 yes. But think about getting 99 no's before then for weeks on end, and this wasn't good. And speaking of morals, the people that would normally get the yeses were the ones that would cold call in and say, hey, I'm Joe's brother. Can you get me in? I need to talk to this guy. And it wasn't quite honest. And I'm not going to claim to be somebody I'm not. So I didn't do very well. I didn't like it. So I did that for a year. And I came back to my wife. Her name is Ann. I said, hey, Ann, this isn't for me. We got to do something else. And luckily, we didn't have, I think Chris is still, I'm hoping Chris is still good at this. We didn't have a whole lot of debt, right? So we had opportunities. At the time, we didn't have any children. I said, I want to get back. And so we came up with 2 courses of action. I was either join the police, Fairfax Police Department. They pay very well, by the way. And I was going to join the Army. And police was the first choice. So I got in the car. You have to take a test. And is anyone from Northern Virginia? Okay, a few. So we're living in this tiny apartment in Falls Church, and I have to go to Fairfax, which means I have to go down to 66. Major storm comes down, accident on 66, hour backup, I missed the test, and they don't let anyone in late. So I went to the recruiter's office. You'll never guess what happened next. I joined the Army. There's a little more to it than that. So I told my dad, hey Dad, I'm thinking about joining the Army. And he said, I'll disown you. It's true. He said that. And I know he was joking to some degree, but he was drafted in Vietnam. It was a very different situation at the time, right? He did not have a pleasant experience in Vietnam. Didn't have a pleasant experience after Vietnam. He didn't talk about it a whole lot, quite frankly. So things were different then. And I think context matters. So on the other side of the coin, my wife's family, her dad was a retired major and her 4 older brothers were in the Army, right? So they're like, Matt, you need to join. Matt, if you're going to be a man, you need to join. So what do? I'm like, I'm going to be mature about this, say no, I joined, right? So I'm not sure what Pat's experience was coming in, but when you join, I had to actually enlist. So what that means is, if you guys don't know, and I apologize for, I hope this isn't condescending, but there's various structures you get into the Army. You can come in enlisted, right? Which means you are not a commissioned officer, you're joining and you're getting it at the base level, entry level, and you're gonna kick butt and do what you're told, and it's gonna be great. The other way you get in is going as a commissioned officer, which means you actually get commissioned with the president that says you swear to uphold and defend the Constitution of the United States, and basically it gives you an authorization to actually command other people, right? To supervise them to some degree. So in the Army, unless you go West Point or ROTC, which you guys don't have here, so no options. So if you want to go Army, you're going to go the way I go. Unless you go direct commission, that's a whole other story. You'd have to be a doctor or a lawyer, which is also actually a really good deal, trust me. But what you have to do is you have to go enlisted. And so you have to enlist, which means you go through basic training, and then you go through officer candidate school, which is another 14 weeks of hell. And then you go to officer basic course, and then you get to go do your job. So for me, that was about a year. So anyway, you go to this MEP station though, right when you start. You sign up and say, I'm going to sign up, and they say, all right, great. You're going to sign up, and it's going to be, whatever, 30 May, and you come to this MEP station. And you go with all the Air Force, all the Navy, all these people, and they look at you and go, yeah, you got 2 eyes, 2 arms, you can do this, we think. And then you go into a room and you all swear an oath to the Constitution. So I signed up in May, and then and fall was my MEP station date. So all summer I've been talking about this. I'm thinking my life's going to change, everything's going to be better. I didn't like my job somewhere else. Now I'm going to go on a new adventure. My wife and I are going to have a sense of purpose because we're giving back to our country that we love. So we've been talking about this for about 3 months. And you get up about 4 in the morning and you go to this MEP station, which is in Baltimore. It's like, it looks almost like a strip mall. It's the most uncool thing you've ever gone to. And you're thinking, what am I getting into, right? So you go to the station at 4 in the morning, they check you out, you go in, I swear that I took my oath, and it took about 3 hours to get to the oath. We come out, and I walk out, and a Marine comes out and goes, something's happened, we gotta turn the TV on. So they turn the TV on, and comes on, and it was the morning news, and within about 5 minutes, the second plane hits the World Trade Center. And you want to talk about something that focuses your attention is when you join the military, within seconds, you know war is about to happen, right? So there I was, and the first thing I think about is my grandma, all right? And you think that's probably the weirdest thing a human being can say at this moment. Well, my grandma was on my mother's side. Her name was MacDonald, and she goes, Matt, your name's Reagan, you're Irish, but you have the luck of the Scots. You join the Army, a war's going to break out. My grandma didn't know it was to the second, but darn, she was close. So, actually, and to this day, my entire career now has been focused on the Middle East. So it's been a weird twist of fate. Again, it wasn't so much, I knew I wanted to give back, but it wasn't this huge discernment of something I always wanted to do. It was something I was going to do for 4 years. I'm almost 20 years into it, like Pat served. I'll retire hopefully this year as Lieutenant Colonel, but it's been a crazy ride. So, that's a really long story. I'm not sure how far into it. Kristen, how much more time I got? 5 minutes? 10 minutes?
Sure. Take
Sure?
your time.
Okay. So post-Christendom, I joined the military after not having fun in software sales. Dad did not disown me. He actually came and put a pin on my my butter bars, which is when I got commissioned as an officer down at Fort Benning, Georgia. And then eventually I had my first deployment. Went to Iraq in '03 in the follow-on forces. As platoon leader, a little experience there. Probably the greatest assignment of my life, despite having some loss. It was weird. So, you know, you get great experiences. Like you sit around the campfire with your guys, you tell stories with your entire platoon. So we sit around the campfire, we tell stories of where we're from, all the different walks of life. And we sit there and we stir. And that campfire, unfortunately, happened to be our own excrement at the time because we didn't have porta potties at the time. So you had to get some gas in there and kind of mix it up real good. Very special blend. But you never understand the mix-up, the bonding you get from a whole bunch of human beings talking about stories over burning your own excrement. This is definitely not being posted to YouTube, right? So, okay. So we went through deployment. Came back, and at this point, I think I'd spent 2.5 years of 4 years of my marriage away from my wife, right? So it had taken somewhat of a toll, and I talked to my branch officer, the person that kind of controls your career, and they said, hey Matt, listen, you can do whatever you want. I said, I know what I want to do. I was saying I'm going to go be an ROTC. I wanted to teach. That was something I wanted to do. And they said, you can definitely do that. But first you need to go back to Iraq. Then you'll come back for a year. Then you're going to go back to Iraq again. And then you can go teach. And I was thinking 2.5 years from Virginia, so I have to count on my hands, that's 4.5 years of my marriage out of whatever it was at the time, 7. I'm like, I'm good. So I was going to get out. I figured I'd done my time. And I got a call from someone I didn't know, Scott Loudermill, and this guy said, hey Matt, you want to join the reserves? And I said, you know what, to be quite frank with you, I'm a pretty peaceful person, despite being in the military and liking to blow things up. I'm kind of good now, like I've had my fill. He goes, you know what, join the Army Corps of Engineers. And I was like, well, why? He goes, we build things, and we get to save people's lives. And I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. That's a little different take. I like building things, you know. I had a Lego set as a kid. And I do like saving people's lives, right? So I joined, and again, not a conscious decision, not a whole lot of discernment, not a 20-year life plan. It was just an opportunity. I was open. So we're talking about being open. Be open to opportunities that present themselves. And that just opened up a whole new world to me. I got out of the military and joined a local construction company down in Winchester called Shockey Construction. Learned more in 1 year than I probably learned almost in 4 years in the military about construction, about building, about project management. Almost burned, not personally, but was part of a major fire in a construction site, which is not good, by the way. Learned a lot about risk management after that. And then, actually, through the reserves, the same Scott hired me on in the Army Corps of Engineers. And where I am today, you know, I'm running a portfolio of construction projects in the Middle East that are, we've got about 1.9 billion right now, and we're looking at about another 4 billion in construction in the next about 5 years, depending on, well, quite frankly, where oil prices go, because that's what funds things in the Middle East, you know. What else can I tell you guys? I'll give you a couple, I'll try to keep it real. How about that? We'll do a couple things that I think people should know about going in from a negative perspective, maybe not negative, but a cautious perspective, I'll put it that way, and maybe a few benefits that I found that you might not know about. So a couple things that you need to know about that aren't the greatest thing. One is a loss of friends, right? When you join the military, you sign, you swear to literally give your life for your country. That's some heavy stuff, quite frankly, and it's not something you should take lightly. I've lost a few friends, quite frankly, and I'm still honestly dealing with it. I'm not going to go too far into it now, but it's something that you need to consider. In the Marines, I know when the Marine 4-star Commandant said, you know what, unless you're an E7, you shouldn't be married, basically. Why? Because you know what, you got to be prepared to go do stuff that's deadly, that's violent, and there's risk inherent in that. So I don't want anyone to disregard the rest. What else? After I joined the reserves, I had another deployment, went to Iraq in 2011. So all said and done, plus all my reserve duty, I don't know where I'm at now, maybe 7 years away from my family in total. That's a lot. It's not insignificant. I missed a lot of birthdays. I missed a lot of Christmases. But all of that, and in fact, I talked to my wife before I came here. You know, I looked at her and we talked about this before. I said, you know, was it worth it? Because I know how I feel, but when you join the military, your family joins. That's just the truth. She's like, yeah, it's definitely worth it. And she kind of smiled, so I knew things were good. So, but there is time away, and so you have to look at what you want out of life and where you're going, and know that there is some sacrifices. But there's some great upsides, and so a few upsides I got. One, all of my professional careers came out of the military, and I'll tell you what. I envision my life somewhat like my family's. Why? Because I'm unimaginative. Okay, so that's what it is. So I figured kind of, end up where my dad ended up, or my parents, something like that. I'm nowhere near that. Not to disrespect my parents, but like I've far surpassed anywhere I thought I'd ever be, and it's primarily because of the opportunities that I got through the military. So there's a major upside to that. The other thing is my wife can say the same thing. So let's go take some water. My wife came out of here with a degree in history. For all you history majors, have a plan, okay? My wife didn't. So we ended up at our first duty station in the middle of Missouri, and you know what a history degree does you in the middle of Missouri? If you don't want to teach, not much, okay? So, but through the military, she was able to get her associates in nursing, her bachelor's in nursing, now she's a nurse practitioner in Winchester. All of that was primarily paid for by Uncle Sam. So there's some serious upsides. She used my GI Bill for the master's, but holy cow, we're talking 5 years of education for free for her. So that panned out for her as well, okay? What else? Oh, I talked about friendships. That's pretty awesome. So some of the biggest bonds you're gonna get are when you're sitting by that beautiful smelly campfire, or when you're down going through raids in Taji or in Baghdad, or even in some of the stillness. It's interesting. The expectations of the military, I think, might be too much framed on what's the word I'm looking for? Two paradigms, two places you get an idea of the military. One's the movies. Well, the movies show the 1% where there's action. The other 99% you're sitting down doing nothing, okay? All right? So the movies show the glory. They don't show all the planning and purpose that takes place beforehand. And the other thing is, I think there's a sense of this broken vet thing that's happened now, where there's a narrative of, he's a veteran, he's depressed or suicidal or something else, which is completely not true either. But what people need to recognize is that the Army, like a big family, has ups and downs, and it's different. Bless you. We have our crazy uncles, and we have a lot of different things, but it's not what you see in the movies or really what you read in the newspapers. It's a job that occasionally can be violent. What else? And then I guess, it shouldn't matter to this, but you're gonna get a sense of purpose joining whatever service you do. That's good. And it's very enriching, and I cannot tell you the difference between working in software sales versus working in the Army, because it's not the same sport, it's not the same continent, it's not the same world. It's a completely different sense of accomplishment. And it's great, and it's done me very well. So I'll leave it there, and I guess I'll open up to your questions like Pat did before, and I apologize for keeping you longer than you wanted to, but I'm hoping it's worthwhile. So what do you guys got?
Sure, it's like a related question. We talked a little bit about what people should do by way of conditioning, what they'd be expected to do in the fitness test, whether the older one, I think there's like a new one kind of.
Yes, yeah. In fact, last week I just took the new Army combat fitness test. And for the first time ever, we're more hua than the Marines in my mind. I passed. So in the old Army physical fitness test, you had to do 2 minutes of push-ups, 2 minutes of sit-ups, and a 2-mile run. That's 100%. And you know what? If you did push-ups, sit-ups, and ran, you passed. And the Army found out, guess what? That has no indication about how you'd actually do in combat. Okay? It had no relation. It meant you could do this many push-ups, this many sit-ups, and that's how fast you could run when someone's shooting at you, right? so the run was somewhat applicable. So after 10 years, I don't know, let's say billions of dollars worth of contracted people figuring out what you do, we have a new test. I'll run through it very quick. You have to do a deadlift. We do it on a trap bar, so just going down and lifting. After that, you do a medicine ball throw, which is to simulate lifting ammo cans, followed by what's called T push-ups, which I thought would be easier because you kind of rest on the ground, and after the push-up, you tee your hands out, which I found out that 4 inches of travel is immensely harder when you're tired after a deadlift. And then you do a sprint drag carry where you have to pull 90 pounds, 25 yards back and forth, and 2 45-pound dumbbells back and forth. Oh, what do you do after that? And then you do a leg tuck where you actually do a pull-up and have to pull your elbows to your knees to your elbow. And you have to do a certain amount of those. And then you do the 2-mile run. And it was by far the most hardest physical assessment I've done in the military. And they gear it by what your job is. What we say is MOS. What do you guys say in the Army? It's MOS. So you get an MOS, which is your job series. So I'm a combat engineer, so we're in what's called the heavy category. So just to make things simple, like I have to do 200-pound deadlift 3 times in a row, no break. If you're a clerk doing something else, you have to do like 110 pounds. So, and it's right now it's gender neutral. So it doesn't matter if you're a man or woman. You can either do the job or you can't, which I think is amazing, by the way. Because before, they had a graded system for men and women, and it was to talk about the physiological differences, which are there, and I represent, which are represented. But honestly, it matters whether you can do the job or not, right? Right? Yeah, so if you can do the job, I don't care who you are, what you look like, done. So does that answer the question? Probably more than you wanted. Any other questions?
Are there any particular habits or routines that someone who's joining the military should try to put into practice while they're still in college?
Yeah, I could think of 2 off the top of my head. One, like Pat said, is physical fitness. Honestly, if you're going to be a leader in the military, you need to be out front. You need to be leading from the front, bless you. And part of that is showing the team that you can do this stuff. So, you know, physical fitness is kind of key here. I'm not sure how equipped the gym is, but you can go online and look at the Army Combat Fitness Test and figure out what you need to do, kind of train for it. But physical fitness is one. The second thing, again, going back to my theme, is being open. So in the Army and the Marines, you know, we say plans are worthless, but planning is everything. And the reason we say that is once you go into battle, usually the enemy comes up with something different, or we have what's called the fog of war. And nothing ever, you can never fully plan out a battle. I would say maybe both in Operation Iraqi Freedom and in the liberation of Kuwait was different because we had an ungodly amount of people against an untrained military, which would have been just an all-out slaughter. So that's slightly different. But I'm saying in peer-to-peer competition, you never know what's going to happen. And the reason I'm going into diverging into all this is because when I say be open to everything. Be open to understanding what your enemy thinks. And outside of an enemy, you know, friendly forces a paradigm, put it into your own life. If you want to know a situation, don't just read people you like. Read people you don't like. Read the other side. Don't read knuckleheads who just spew hate or something else. But truly read something. If you want to know what a liberal thinks, don't go to MSNBC. Go to the New York Times. Okay? Like, you don't understand and you can't really formulate a cohesive or honestly good argument unless you do a straw man argument, until you actually read what the other side has to think. So it's really be open in college. Challenge yourself. Be there to, and especially in this environment, come on, I mean, it's a great place for you to really push your boundaries and do it in a safe place, okay? So be open. Any other questions? I got all the hard ones stuff to go. I'm not delving into culture war stuff now. That's it? All right, well, grab a beer.
Thank you, gentlemen, so much. That was so enlightening, and honestly, I've never seen so many gentlemen at one of these events in one area. So we brought them here, and you've entertained them and kept them here.
I can smell the testosterone.
I think I might leave soon. They will be here for a little bit. If anybody wants to come speak to them individually and talk to them, shake their hand, thank them, ask them questions. If you didn't check in and you actually got here late, too bad. Try again. We do have other events coming up. April 15th, which is a Thursday night, which is different. So mark your calendar for Thursday. We have Tom Jones coming to speak. He is not an alum. No. Another Tom Jones, yes. Usually I use that disclaimer, but I was like, they might not know who Tom Jones is. But then on Wednesday, April 21st is our final Life on Tap, which we are doing something different. We are bringing 4 recent graduates back, and we're going to do a panel up here where we're asking them about what is life actually like just a year or two out of Christendom, so they can answer some of your other questions. So hopefully we'll see you then. Thank you all for coming and staying.